It is wonderful to see everybody sending the link in here so that everybody can follow along. And Gemar Chasim Tova. There we go. Okay. We left off, we're just going to review very briefly. We left off at the bottom of, we'll review from Amarava, at the bottom of Daf Lamed Daled Amud Beis. Today, of course, is the third day of the month of Tishrei, and it is Sam Gedalia and Gemar Chasim Tova to everybody. Reviewing the last two lines from Amarava, Lamed Daled Amud Beis, and continuing on to Lamed Hey Amud Aleph, says the Gemara as follows. Amar Rava. Rava says, we're talking about the additional chumras that the Rabbanan had, the additional dinim de Rabbanan that the Rabbanan instituted with regards to kachim. Says Rava, Av Ananami Tanina, we also have this in a brisa. V'nasan alav mayim chaim el keli. The pasuk says, with regards to the mei para aduma, the waters that you use to make the para aduma, that v'nasan alav mayim chaim el keli, that you have to put mayim chaim. Mayim chaim means water from a spring. El keli into the kli. This is the Rabbanan learned that they have to flow into the kli, that they have to chiyas in the kli, meaning they go, you draw it directly from the mayim chaim into the kli. But the pasuk also says v'nasan, that you have to put it there. Alma Tlushininu. That sounds like that V'nasan means that you could put the water in. So does it mean that it has to flow into your jug in order to be used for paraduma water, or that you put it in from another jug? So it says but you can't have it connected and disconnected at the same time. Top of Lamed Hey Amud Aleph says the Gemara Elam Maila. This was a din midrabanan hachinam Maila. So too here with regards to all kachim that became tamei. That they made a gzera that you cannot be metahiret by planting it into the ground. So this is a mila by when it comes to kachim. Amar of Simi Bar Ashi says, of Simi Bar Ashi, we have another example of this. Tov v'Allah oichel b'meiser. The halacha is that if a person was tovel, who went to the mikveh v'Allah and he came out from the mikveh, oichel b'meiser, he can eat meiser, but he can't yet eat anything else, meaning any other kachim things. You can eat ma'aser because that would be, you could eat it betare, it's tahar, but he is now a tvul yom. Harav shimsha, but once it became nighttime, so it's a tvul yom, and now harav shimsha, now it's nighttime. Oichel b'truma, he's allowed to eat truma. B'truma in. With regards to truma, yeah, he can. But by karbanos, lie. He's not allowed to. Why? Because he still needs to bring a karban. He's mechusar kapara. He needs to bring a karban. For example, Yolelis. Yolelis goes to the mikveh, and then she's going to bring the karban the next day. She had a baby, she's going to bring the karban the next day. But that night, can she eat from other kachim? No. Amai, why? Taharhu. The guy is tahar, right? So elamala. No, there's a din midrabanan. Achinam mala. So too with regards to planting a kachim back into the ground, it will not be able to be matarid. Amar of Ashi says, Rav Ashi afananami taneina. We also have another brisa vehabasa. With regards to basar, the pasuk says that if you have basar of a karban that comes in that comes in contact with anything tamei, it says the pasuk basar ashi gabachal tamei lo yeachel beishi saref vehabasar kol tar yachel basar. That anything that if the basar touches anything tamei, it has to be burnt. Vehabasar, and in general, or all other basar that's not tamei, kol tar yachel basar. Anybody that is tar is allowed to eat it. So says the Gemara, Rav Ashi quoting the brisa, l'rabbis esa itzma levina. So the fact that you have basar that is tamei, you cannot use. Like you cannot eat, and basar that is tahar, you can. So those two things seem to be perfect circles in the Venn diagram. Yeah, you just say this. You don't need to say the other thing. So vehabasar. So what does it mean? L'rabas ha'etzim u'levina. That would include other things that are not basar. L'rabas ha'etzim u'levina means basar and all things that are like it, which would mean the wood and the frankincense that are used in the Beis Hamikdash. So we say etzim u'levina. Can wood and frankincense become tummy. They're not oichlin, they're not mashkin, they're not other than a kelim. How can you make it tummy? Ella, no, this is a din midrabanan. It is not a din midraisa, and the rabbanan found an asmachta, meaning they found a remez in the Torah to hint to it as well. This is a din midrabanan. Okay. Back to Hilchas Chametz and Matzah on Pesach. This is one of the fundamental and primary sugyas in all of Hilchas Pesach. This next Mishnah, this comes up all the time. Halacha l'maaseh b'zman hazeh in lots of different ways. Says the Mishnah as follows: These are the things that a person can use to fulfill his obligation of matzah on Pesach. There's a mitzvah. What exactly does that include? What can you make a matzah out of? Says the Mishnah, Bechitin, Besa'orim, Bekusmin, Beshifon, Beshibalis Shul. These are the 5 species of grain. That's chitin is wheat, Sa'orim is barley, Kusmin is spelt, Shifon is rye, and Shibalis Shul is oats. This is Girsa the Yankasa. When I was in, I think, 8th grade, 9th grade, I had a Rebbe that taught me that the Rashi Tevis for this is warbs, wheat, oats, rye, barley, spelt, warbs. V'yotzin, it says the Mishnah, v'yotzin b'dmai, u'v'maisa rishon shenitlu trumasa. You can also fulfill, if any of these grains are dmai, you can fulfill your obligation with dmai, which is food that grain that you're not sure if the trumas maisas were taken from. U'maisa rishon shenitlu trumasa, and maisa rishon, that first ma'aser that's given to the Levi, as long as the truma was taken from it, and ma'aser sheni that you're supposed to eat in Yerushalayim, and hektish, and stuff that was dedicated to the Beis Hamikdash, sheniftu, that were redeemed. And the Kohanim are allowed to eat b'chala v'truma. They're allowed to eat the matzah from challah and from truma. Challah meaning the stuff that from the dough that is taken off for the kohen. Obviously, that does not mean challah, what we call challah today, meaning chametz. Aval loy b'tevel, but you are not allowed to use tevel. Tevel is stuff that has no trumas ma'aser taken from it at all. V'loy b'ma'aser rishon shelo nishlo trumasai, not ma'aser rishon, who's meaning you took the ma'aser rishon, but you didn't take trumas ma'aser from the ma'aser rishon. The additional truma that the Levi has to take, so that needs to be taken off as well. And you cannot use ma'aser sheni and hektish that were not redeemed. And chalas toida, if you have the chalas of the korban toida, urikiki nazir, and the wafers that to come with the korban of the nazir, says the Mishnah, asan la'atzma, if you made them for yourself, meaning you made them dedicated for the purposes of using for that korban, any yotzim, you cannot use them. But if you made them, you happen to be a guy that specializes in Beis Hamikdash baking products, so people come by and they buy chalas toda and they buy rikiki nazir on their way up to the Beis Hamikdash, so you happen to have stock of these things, so yotzim, you are allowed to use them for your matzah, and we'll understand all of these din within the Gemara. Says the Gemara as follows. Tana. We have in a Tosefta, kusmin. What exactly is kusmin? Min chitin. It is a subcategory of wheat. Spelt as a kind of wheat. Shibala shual, oats. Oats, v'shifon and rye. Min sa'orin are subspecies of barley. Says the Gemara now, translating into Aramaic. Kusmin is called gulba. Shifon is called dishra. Shibala shual is Shuvili Tala. Those are the Aramaic names for these species. Hani in, these ones you can. This is the important din within this Tosefta to explain. Hani in, these ones you could use to make matzah on Pesach. Oris v'doichan loy. Rice, oris, and doichan millet. No, you're not allowed to use those to make matzah on Pesach. Says the Gemara, okay. How do I know this din? Amar Rabbi Shimon Lakish says, Rabbi Shimon Lakish v'chein Tana debei Rabbi Shimon. This is also taught in the house of Rabbi Shmuel. V'chein Tana debei Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. This is also taught in the base medrash of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. Amar Kra, the pasuk says as follows: Lo yisachal alav chametz. Don't eat on it chametz. Shivas yom tochal alav matzah. 7 days you have to eat on it matzahs. Says the Gemara, what's the limit? Dvarim habayim lidei chimutz. Things that can become chametz. Adam yotzav hem yidei chavasav matzah. You are able to fulfill your obligation of matzah. That excludes things that don't undergo the chemical process called chimutz, called leavening, but they undergo a process called sirchon, which is another kind of breaking down of the molecules with this grain, but it doesn't turn into chametz. It turns into some other kind of fermentation called sirchon. That's a different kind of chemical process, different kind of fermentation. Says the Gemara as follows: Mas nisin deloik Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. Our mission is clearly not like the Tana Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. Why? The Amar Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri is of the opinion Oris min daganhu, that Oris, rice, is a kind of grain. And therefore, v'chayav al chimutzay kares. And if you eat rice on Pesach, you are chayav kares. This is not the makar for the minhag of Ashkenazim not to eat kidneys. We do not pass on like Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, but Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri was of the opinion that you can make matzah out of rice, and you would be chayav for eating rice on Pesach because of the issur of an issur kares of eating chametz. The Tanya. The Brisa says, Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, he forbids the eating of oris of rice and doichan of millet because they are close to being leavened. What does it exactly mean? Shekarv lahachmetz. So the Gemara wants to know, what does that mean? Who they ask, shekarv lahachmetz? What do you mean that it's close to being chametz? It's not chametz. It's close to being chametz. It's no, the kodum machmetz, because it turns into chametz very quickly, very quickly. It is a slightly different process, says Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, but it's more severe. Or perhaps, karev lahachmetz have chametz gomer lo have. Alternatively, karev lahachmetz means it turns into something that's close to chametz, but it's not really chametz. So, meaning, how does Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri hold? Tashma. We have a brisa that says as follows: Tanya Amar Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, says Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, oris min daganhu. Oris is a kind of grain. And you get karetz for eating it. And you are able to fulfill your mitzvah of matzah on Pesach using this oris. Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, Omer, and the Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri also taught karmis chayeves b'chala, that karmis, which is a kind of wheat, chayeves b'chala, is chayev in chala. You have to take off chala from that. My karmis, what is this karmis? Amar Abaye. Abaye tells us that's called nisa. She's nisa. My she's nisa, says the Gemara. Amar Papa. Papa says she's nisa. De mishtacha beni kalanyasa. He says this is a kind of grain that is grown between the reeds of the kalanaisa. What exactly is kalanaisa? That's papyrus, apparently. Papyrus reeds. Rashi tells us over here. He says shishnitza is katzach shekarin naila belaz igul hu kein doichan v'shachar lishna achrin shamati, and it gives you the lazia v'nimtzes b'shifon. These are different kinds of species. But the upshot of what Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri was telling us here is that since you can fulfill your mitzvah of matzah, and you can fulfill your and you can violate chametz, it means that it's real chametz. And Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri also holds that this karmis is chayiv in chala. And the Gemara continues. Amar Rabbi Bar Chana, says Rabbi Bar Chana. Amar Rish Lakish, the name of Rish Lakish, Isa shenilo isha beyayin v'shem l'dvash. What happens if you kneaded dough with yain, with wine, b'shemen, with oil, dvash, with honey? Ein chayev al chimutz kares. You would not be chayev kares for eating this stuff, because it will somehow or another interrupt the chimutz process. That seems to be the understanding here. Rashi says here, the may peros ain't machmitzin, as we're going to see. That and that means Rashi says, there's no water there at all. There's no water at all. If you were to and the same is true with yain. There's no water at all. It's only these liquids. You wouldn't be chayav kares. Says the Gemara, Yasef Rav Papa Rav Huna Berei Rav Yeshua Kamed Rav Idi Bar Avin Yasef Rav Idi Bar Avin V'Ka Menamne. So in this whole story, Rav Idi Bar Avin was nodding off. In the base Spanish, Amar Le Rav Huna Berei Rav Yeshua Rav Papa My time the Rish Lakish. Rav Papa says to Rav Huna says to Rav Papa, my time of the Rish Lakish. What's the rationale of Reish Lakish that dough that is kneaded with wine, oil, and honey, you are not chayiv kares for eating it, for eating that bread. Amarle says the Amakra, the pasuk says alav chametz dvarim she'adam yotze behem yidei chavas b'matzah chayivim al chimutz kares, because you cannot use it to make matzah, so you wouldn't be chayiv kares on eating it. V'ha hol ve'ein adam yotze b'yidei chavasai. So he says, since a person is not going to be able to fulfill his obligation, the havilei matzah ashir, because this is called matzah ashira. This is called rich matzah. Ein chayav al chimutz kares. You would not be chayiv kares for it. Meaning, this is matzah that you cannot use for your leil haseder. Why? Says Rashi, v'rachmana amar lechem oini, that in order to fulfill the mitzvah of matzah on Pesach, you need to have lechem oini, which means poor man's bread. This bread is rich. It has not flour and water. This has flour and oil, and flour and honey, flour and wine. That's not called lechem oini. That's called matzah ashira. Esivei Rav Huna bered Rav Yeshua Rav Papa. Rav Yeshua says back to Rav Papa, himcho vegamu. What happens if you dissolved something in water and swallowed it on Pesach? Vegamu. Im chametzu, if the thing that you swallowed is chametz, onish kares, you are liable for kares. Im matzahu, if what the thing that you swallowed is matzah, ein onish yedei chavas v'Pesach, then you did not fulfill your obligation on Pesach. Meaning there has to be some kind of middle ground, something that you're not chayev, something that you are chayev kares, but you wouldn't be able to use for matzah. Which throws a wrench in this whole limit. You wouldn't be able to use it as matzah, and you would be liable for kares for eating it. In the meantime, says the Gemara, Isar behu Ravidi Barabin. Ravidi Barabin sitting in the base medrash, wakes up. Amarlu, he says to them, Dar decay, children, is yelling at them. You want to know what Rish Lakish is talking about? Mishum dahavel me Paris. The reason that you are not chayiv kares is not because it doesn't fulfill the mitzvah of matzah. The reason is that this is called mei peros, and mei peros ein machmitzin. And when you have mei peros, when you have fruit juice, ein machmitzin, that interrupts the chimutz process, the chemical process, and it has nothing to do with lechem oni and whether or not you'll be able to fulfill your mitzvah or not. It's because it doesn't become chametz. Mei peros is ein machmitzin. We'll continue with the next piece of the sugi yotze b'dmayim ma'aser tomorrow morning. Everybody should have a beautiful day and a gmar chasima tova.